In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to explain to you exactly how I made 10 lakhs and 48,000 rupees in this stock. The stock's name is Cupid, and I'm going to explain how I did this over 2 trades. This is going to be a two-part video series. So this is the first trade breakdown, the first trade that I took in Cupid. Let's get started and let's understand how this trade did well for me and what were the factors that I looked at in order to make sure that I was able to bet big and I was able to make money as well. All right, so let's start with my first position in Cupid. Now, this position in Cupid was taken on the 15th of April, right? And if we have a look at the markets on the 15th of April, which I will just open for you guys right here, we can see that if I open the CNX small cap, on the 15th of April, our markets were in a very, very good state. We can see very clearly that on the 8th of April, we saw a big gap up here. This gap up was, of course, due to the fact that the ceasefire was announced. So I'm just going to actually screen grab this and put this over here on this particular whiteboard, and we will discuss exactly what happened on a proper basis. Right. So over here, what happened was that we saw a ceasefire get announced, right? Now, when the ceasefire was announced, now, the announcement of the ceasefire actually led to a lockout rally in the markets, a rally that no one expected would actually turn out to be a lockout rally, but it did happen, right? This lockout rally lasted for a very long period of time. And what happened is that in this particular rally, it was impossible for a lot of traders to find good trades that were low risk and gave proper pivot points. A lot of the trades in this particular rally started moving from improper pivot points. So it gave a lot of novice traders the idea that the markets will continue to behave that way and that it will be easy to make money from stocks that don't set up properly or that don't make that right hand side in an appropriate manner. However, let's go back to the sort of events that took place. So over here, we can see very clearly that the index started making higher lows, right? So it was evident that sort of we are coming towards a bottom. At the same time, the number of stocks that were below the 50 and 200-day moving averages were also significantly in their oversold criteria and their oversold levels. And what happened from there on, of course, news flow came in, the markets gapped up on the ceasefire news and then did not look back at all. But what is interesting to see is that typically when you reclaim the 50-day moving average after such a long run, you will always tend to pause over here. And that did not happen. Okay, that's fine. You went to the 200-day moving average. You will tend to pause over here. That did not happen. And that is exactly why this particular rally became a lockout rally and started moving abnormally high without any selling coming in. And whoever was able to capitalize on this particular rally made a lot of money. Now, Cupid was a stock that was taken within this lockout rally, but I too struggled because I could not find low risk entry points with picture perfect pivots that I wanted to see. And looking back at it, potentially I could have taken a few trades that were not, ideal, but that would again go against my rules. And I don't know if I wanted to do that. Okay. Now, Cupid is an example of what you should do in a market when you see stocks are giving solid after breakout action, right? A very good example at that period of time was MTAR Tech. Look at this. The stock broke out and was already up 90%, right? That's a massive run up. And when I bought Cupid on the what on the 15th of April, let's see where MTAR Tech had reached. Okay, so MTAR Tech on the 15th of April was already up 37%. That's massive gains. Another stock was KRN, right? KRN moved as well. And when I bought Cupid, KRN was up 22%. So what is the first thing that I saw when I took Cupid, right? The number one thing that I saw when I bought Cupid was stocks showing after breakout action, right? And this is extremely important to understand. The first thing was that stocks were showing me after breakout action. What is the second thing that I was seeing? I was seeing that stocks are moving from improper pivots. And that is not a good sign, right? I was seeing very clearly that a lot of stocks are breaking out, but they are not waiting. What is a good example in this particular period of time? Q Power. Look at this. You break out from here, you come up, you pause. Ideally, what happens in a good market? You come to the 10-day, you make a nice flag. But in this case, that just did not happen. The stock continued to move upwards 12% from this entire pivot point. So stocks started moving. There were no entry points, a lot of gaps in the index as well. And when that happens, it becomes tough to catch a trade. However, I think I got lucky. I was able to catch Cupid and I was able to ride it well. So now let's discuss exactly what I did in Cupid and how I went about trading this name. I've given you a sort of overall context on what the market environment was like. Now, if I take the chart of Cupid, right, and I'll just hide my drawings real quick, and then I will show you what I was seeing and what got me interested in Cupid right over here. So I'm just going to screen grab this and I'm going to put it right here again. And let's understand what was so fascinating to me about this chart in Cupid. All right. Now, Cupid was a stock. If we actually have a look over here, this had a fantastic move upwards, a big move upwards. I think this was around 350% almost. Let's double check that. So, from this pivot point right here, this stock went up 387%, right? So, around that range. Now, after this stock made a massive move upwards of 350%, now let's see what happens here. This stock starts making higher lows and it contracts in a VCP like formation, right? So, fantastic contraction being taken place in Cupid. At the same time, you're seeing contraction in price over here as well. You're seeing high volume bars when they are buying bars, and you're seeing low volume bars when they're selling bars. So, this is all signs of a very good stock. Okay, now I want to discuss a couple more things which got me attracted to Cupid in the first place. If we have a look at what the setup was looking like right here, all right, we can see very clearly that this stock had made a good pivot over here. And then it bounced from here, broke out on 6% on a bang of 206 crores, then came back down to the 10-day moving average. And this is where I got interested. Over here, I was still a bit dicey on the market because this is 8th of April. What was happening in the small cap index on the 8th of April? Let's have a look. 8th of April is when the small cap index had its big gap up. I have a rule that I always, right? Always, let's go back to these points that we were writing down. I always like to let go of the first batch of breakouts, right? What happens is in this case, I get good feedback from what the market actually is looking like. And this has saved me multiple times in the bear market. So over here, right, when stocks were breaking out and then failing, breaking out, failing, breaking out, failing, breaking out, failing, when I let go of stocks, right, in this market environment, what happened in that case is that it made it easier for me to not have big drawdowns. However, over here, when I let go of stocks, they just kept running upwards massively, which is fine. You're going to have to be on both sides of the game. You're not just going to get the better side of the coin every single time. But we managed to buy Cupid. Now, over here, that's the reason I didn't take the entry point in Cupid because the index had just bounced. So there was no entry point which was valid to me per se. Then what happens? Stock comes down towards the 10-day moving average. Now, let's see at this particular point of time, did Cupid match all of my criterias? So, I have 7 criterias that I look for when I like to buy any stock. My first criteria is that I want to see whether this environment is good in the market. What do I mean by whether the environment is good? Is the market conducive to breakout trading? Is the small cap index above the 10-day, which means above its key moving averages? And at the same time, are stocks working? So I've already shown you examples of how stocks were working. Alongside that, the small cap index was above the 10-day moving average at this particular point of time. So first condition ticked. Now the second condition is the stock in stage 2? Very evidently, the stock is in stage 2. It had a big base over here, broke out, another base is being formed over here. So this stock is in stage 2. The third condition that I have is that the stock should have a prior up move. Now I have seen that clearly that the stock has a very big prior up move and it had a very nice manner of doing so. Now the fourth condition is the stock does the stock have clean price action and does it have thrust? So I can see over here that the stock has the ability to give those big candles. It gave me a 6% candle here. It gave me a 13% candle here. So I was very convinced that the stock has thrust. Now the move that came after my buying, that is a separate case. But till this point of time, I had everything that I wanted to see that the stock has thrust, right? It is clean minus price action riding the 10-day very, very well. The last one, sector strength. I think Bajaj Consumer was a stock in the FMCG space. Of course, Cupid is not necessarily in the FMCG space, but it is in that sort of, it it makes condoms which it actually supplies to NGOs and things like that. So it's not necessarily for the retail market, but the space overall, which is to do with sort of, consumer goods, was doing pretty good. Bajaj Consumer was the first stock that I was looking at in this particular space, and it was already up 20% from that point of time. So Cupid, I sort of pushed it into a similar criteria. While it's not the completely the same exact fit, for me, it was similar enough for me to consider it to be in the same sector, is what I'm trying to say. So I saw the sector strength. I think that was good as well. Was the pivot at the 10-day? Yep, the 10-day had caught up to the pivot. And liquidity of the stock was very good. So the stock was liquid as well, which all of them matched my entry point criterias. Then I saw what is my stop loss. My stop loss was 4.5%, which is fine. I had a trade going on in fractal at this particular point of time, which had broken out and had closed above my sort of entry. And the next day, the stock was, let's show you. The next day, the stock was up another 2.5%, right? So my stop loss here was 3%. The stock was up 5%. So the stock was doing pretty good. So that is when I decided to take my entry in Cupid. And the first day, Cupid actually squatted, right? So when a stock squats on the first day, that is not an issue at all. It's completely fine. Now, if we go to the trade management side of things, let's see how I manage this trade. Next day, what happens? Okay, stock is again up from my buying point. Then I get a big breakout of 8%. So automatically, if my stop loss is 4.5% and the stock is up 9.63%, what does that make my stock? It makes my stock risk free. I make my stocks risk free at 2 hour, right? And 7 out of 7 entry criterias were fulfilled. That makes Cupid for me a no-brainer. Risk-free trade, 7 out of 7 entry criteria is fulfilled. And I feel that this stock only became risk-free because I had my 7 out of 7 entry criteria fulfilled. Okay, now that we've discussed when the stock became risk-free, let's go ahead. All right, stock again starts moving upwards, no issues, continuously moving upwards. And now by this point, I was up 20% on my trade already. So that is fantastic. Automatically, I have entered the zone that I am in a good cushion. 20% size, 20% move. I'm like up 4% impact on my portfolio. Did not touch the trade at all till now. However, it got to the point where now I'm looking that if I get to see abnormal action in a stock, then I will look to book some gains. Let's see what happens. Over here, we get an outside day. On an outside day, I book my first 1/3, right? I'm in good gains. Outside day, sell rule for me. I book 1/3. I'm out of the stock. Also keep in mind, start of the year, no cushion yet. Fractal had gotten out at break even at this point, right? So no cushion. I was looking to get a cushion, sold 1/3. If we were deeper into this bull market and I was on a 50% cushion on my portfolio, I would probably not sell this on such a small outside day because it's not a massive outside day, right? The volatility is pretty insignificant. However, keeping in mind what the situation was, I decided to book 1/3. Then stock comes back to the 10-day and not to the 10-day, sorry, but it gets super tight. The volumes dry up completely. And that is when I decide to take another position. I add back the 1/3 that I sold in Cupid and I continue to ride the stock. Now, would I take this as a fresh entry? Absolutely not. For the simple reason that over here, I want the 10-day to catch up like it was over here in this case. However, that did not happen. But since it was only a pyramid position, I decided to take another 1/3 back into the stock. Stock starts moving up very well. And here comes the first shakeout in Cupid. This is where I booked 2/3 at this particular shakeout, leaving me with only 1/3. Now, how much gains was I sitting at its peak? 40% gains. So at 40% gains, I think it was pretty valid for me to actually, book 2/3 of my gains. However, something that I've learned recently is that no no stock will make 100% move without giving a scary candle in the middle. And that applies to the second trade that I took in Cupid. Again, keep in mind that this is my first big trade of the year. So I'm obviously having that feeling that I want to develop a significant cushion because then it'll make it easier for me to justify taking more trades. So later down in the year, I should not make the same sort of, shakeout exits, especially not 2/3. Just take the 1/3 off again, right? And then you continue riding 2/3 because if you want to catch those 120% moves, it is almost it's bound to happen that you get a big shakeout candle like this. So that was one learning that I had from Cupid, which I did not apply to the second trade, but we'll get into that in the second part of this trade breakdown. Then what happens? Okay, stock comes back up, comes tight, and on this big crack, when the 5 day started breaking, because I was in very high gains in Cupid and I was looking to exit the stock, I think the stock had done its purpose for me as a swing trade. Earnings were coming up soon as well. When the 5 day cracked, I sold 1/6 of the 1/3 that I had left, so half of my 1/3, and then I booked completely when the 10 day got broken. That was the end of my trade in Cupid. The first part of this trade was this entire move. I made some good money in Cupid. I think I made a majority of the 10 lakhs, 60% of the 10 lakhs in this particular first trade, and then the rest of it came in the second trade. The second trade could have been much better, which we'll get into. That was where I made some more mistakes, but I feel like in this particular trade, I had superb trade management, right? I don't regret waiting for the 10 day close and all, of course, for the simple reason that the market environment uh, was not the best in terms of waiting for the 10 day. I was in very, very good gains as well at this peak at like what 41, 42% gains. So taking all of those things into consideration, I feel like what I did was fine, right? First trade of the year as well. So I was just looking to take the money home. Because there were not a lot of setups otherwise, right? There were very, very few good quality setups that were actually breaking out. So that was the way that I thought about Cupid. I feel like something that I could have done better is that this shakeout potentially have waited and only taken 1/3 off instead of 2/3. So that is something that I could have done better. But yes, that was my first trade in Cupid. I have broken it down for you guys with everything that was going on in my mind. In the next video, we will break down the second sort of trade that I took in Cupid, which led to more gains. But what I did wrong and what I could have done much better in that second part. We will break that down, right? Because the second part had some emotions into it. So if you've liked it so far, please like, subscribe, comment, join the channel, right? It would be lovely to have you guys over. And if you would like to learn with me, the Telegram community is open for you guys. The link is going to be in the description, and you can always also look at the pinned comment. Thank you so much for joining me in today's video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Stay safe and take care. Thank you so much.